And you need one of those friends that'll tell you, hey, you got something between your teeth. Right
Yeah. Yeah. You need that because that's your unused devices.
You're listening to the Help Me with HIPAA podcast, where HIPAA and humor collide to make learning fun. Your delightful hosts are Donna Grindle and David Sims. Relax. HIPAA help is on the way.
This is Eric Stokes from Brightside IT in Atlanta, Georgia, and you're listening to Help Me with HIPAA podcast.
Welcome to episode 301 of the Help Me with HIPAA podcast. Yes, it is a 301 redirect. For all you nerds out there. No, we're not going to redirect you today. We're going to be talking about basic cyber hygiene. That's right. Yeah. Brush your teeth and wash your tail. But we're going to tell you what that means in the cyber world because it is a fairly new term. And, even though we've mentioned it several times over the past few weeks, what do we really mean when we say that? Mm-hmm. So some people don't know.
It would be good. It would be good.
So I think we'll spell that out for you, help you solve some cyber issues by improving your cyber hygiene so you don't stink. Because believe me, there's been many of people's networks we walk into and it stinks. It's pretty bad.
Yeah. Just think of it as you walk into a hotel room that, no stay motel versus a luxury one. Which one would you rather stay in? There's your cyber hygiene.
The no-tail motel?
Yeah. No-tail, well, let's don't go down that path. Both of us will get in trouble.
Yeah. I have a funny no-tail story. So I'm traveling with a friend of mine and, we're both exhausted. We want to stop and sleep somewhere, but we don't need a place for the entire night. It's middle of the day. We've been driving all night. So we literally want to sleep 3 to 4 hours and get up and get back on the road. And so the guy says to me, let's stop up here and see if they'll just give us a room for a few hours. I'm like, I'm not walking in there with you asking for an hourly rate on a room.
No.
He's like, oh, yeah, I didn't think about that.
That's just wrong.
Yeah. So anyway, that brings us to the HIPAA boot camp. Virtual edition. Yeah, I know. You don't have to stay anywhere because it's the virtual edition.
There you go.
August 17, 18, and 19, it will be virtual. So you can stay right where you at. But the next HIPAA boot camp's coming up. We already have people signing up for it. Super exciting. We're doing this virtual thing pretty good. I think we've got a lot nailed down on how this works.
Yeah. We'll have to figure out what we're going to do in 2022.
Oh, goodness.
Let's not worry about that right now.
I was going to say, don't start freaking me out already.
I know. It's far enough. That's far enough.
Yep. So if you want to know more information about that, head on over to thehipaabootcamp.com for all the information and to get registered early because there are perks to getting in early.
Yes, there are.
All righty. Very good. Thanks again to our donors. Make sure you leave us a review if you like this show. If you don't like it, just don't leave anything and don't tell anybody. Just quietly go away. And if you do like it, tell everybody.
There you go. Tell everybody you know. Even those that'll look at you like, why would I listen to a podcast like that?
I know. Mm-hmm. So, that's the way customers and patients always do, right? You can't get them to tell anybody about you until you have a bad experience and they want to tell everybody. All right. Ready to get into it?
Might as well.
Okay, then. Let's do this. It's on you now, boo.
I was waiting to see where you're going to go with it. All right. So we have mentioned cyber hygiene several times lately about if we would just do basic cyber hygiene, it would solve a lot of our problems when it comes to all of the cyber attacks and being down, all those kind of things. So I thought maybe we should explain what we're talking about when we say that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Just in case everybody doesn't know what's in our heads when we say things.
Yeah.
Apparently, I assume that people know things way too much when it makes complete sense to me. and no one tells me that no one else knows. So now I have to assume that maybe somebody would like to know more about basic cyber hygiene and what we're talking about.
Mm-hmm. It's like, yeah, I wash my hands before I touch the keyboard. What more do you want?
Yeah, there you go. But the big thing, trying to equate, years ago, I did a presentation where I took the guide for infection control from the CDC and turned it into a guide for cybersecurity and talked about cyber hygiene. And I thought it was a great idea, and it just really went flat. But apparently now it's catching on. So we're going to take that back into play, and you can look at it a couple of different ways. And I think it's important that we understand, just like we mentioned, the hotel and the difference in going into a space that is well cared for, one that's moderately cared for, and one that's cared for very well as an individual, because both apply when we're talking about cyber hygiene. You've got the environment that you're in as well as you as an individual, and we have to worry about both of them and how they're cared for. It's the love and caring of yourself and your environment. That's what cyber hygiene is all about. So we know if you don't take a bath and wash your hands and brush your teeth, and please wear deodorant. I know it's not necessarily in every culture of the world, but once you learn, you might change your mind. So try
somebody gets you in the headlock.
Oh, let me tell you something. My nephew, I've got several of them that are over 6'5", and one of them grew, I want to say like 6 inches in a matter of months. He was constantly needing food and all of that stuff, but he loves me. And I went from hugging him where we were kind of head to head, and there was this stall in his growth pattern where I landed in his armpit every time he wanted to hug me. And when they're growing like that and they're teenage boys, I don't have to tell you, having so many of them, you can't keep them from smelling bad. And I'm like, I love you. Give you a hug.
I'm going in.
But anyway, so it is, again, the reason that, let's just say that many times there are impressions that are made by others by how you take care of your surroundings and yourself. Not only does your body do better, but mentally you feel better if you are caring for yourself, self-care, as well as your environment.
Mm-hmm.
So let's just say that it for some people, that if you meet someone, you assume that there is some sort of an inability or an unwillingness to care for themselves if they are not keeping up with their personal hygiene in their environment. So if we look at it that way, then consider how much you are taking care of your network. Are you looking at it and your devices? Do you realize that when people see it and there's no doors on it, and what doors are there, they're sitting open and the windows are hanging, and no one's paid attention to the paint in years because, hey, they still work. Mm-hmm. Then that's your environment that the cyber criminals see first when they look at this place that hasn't been cared for. So look around. How many computers are around you in your office that maybe haven't been cared for very well? Let's say, how many times, David, do you go into a site and pull out a desktop computer that when you pull it out, the entire back of it is encased in dust?
Yeah.
It's pretty
more often than I care to run into it. Yeah.
Yeah. There are times where you just scrape it off before you blow it out.
I got a terrible blowing out story. We had this is years ago, but we had a technician. I always gave the technicians a vacuum cleaner, right? Here's a small shop vac. If you run into these computers that are like that, vacuum them out. So this one technician had a bright idea that canned air would be best. And so he opens up this case and it's completely nasty with dust and, all these other things. We call them dust bunnies and something. One time we even found a dead rat inside one. But so the guy commences to spray in the pressured air into there, and the dust just filled the room, got all over everything. Yes. So it's like, no, we do not blow stuff around. We vacuum things up.
No, you use that for like tiny little dust particles, not like the casing that we see. Poof, poof. So definitely one of those scenarios, if you saw that an individual was coated in dust as they walked around, then that's what your computer is. And it comes from the outside as well as the care on the inside, just like, your teeth, if they're falling out. And
they're covered with dust.
Are covered with dust. If you're not brushing your teeth, it's really obvious what starts to happen to them. So all of those things it's really happening with your network and your computers and those kind of things if you're not showing them love and care, which is the same as, your individual. So think of all of the wiring that comes hanging out and where there's just random access points hanging from the ceiling and so on and so forth. All of those things, those really matter.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what technical people see, including the cyber criminals.
Yep.
I don't think it would take much to break into this house versus that one over there that is fully manicured. Everything is in place. It's taken care of regularly. It seems to have a security system at the driveway. There's a security system and cameras at the door. And then I got this rundown thing next door, and they don't even see each other. They don't know they're in the same neighborhood, but the cyber criminals do.
Mm-hmm.
So pretty easy for me to say, well, I'm going to wander in there.
Yep.
Now, if the person going in that front door of the fancy house, if the gate opens up and they're able to walk by all those cameras and that person has not, let's just say it's really clear they may have spent the last 6 months without washing their hair and taking a bath and washing their hands, and they just walk in because they own the big fancy house. Guess what? I'm going to know I can follow them in. They're going to just lead me right in that door. They're going to take me in.
Yeah, that might be why they call these network tools sniffers.
Indeed. Good thinking, my man. There are sniffers out there.
Yes, and they can smell you.
And the sniffers find openings in the network.
Yep.
So now you're starting to feel that whole cyber hygiene thing and why it works really well as examples.
Yep.
So what would be then the proper hygiene for managing the environment and then the individuals when it comes to cybersecurity and cyber hygiene?
Mm-hmm.
What do you know, Joe? We've got the managers and the people in charge of the home and the network, which is the bigger company. But don't forget, we still have to worry about the individuals at home, especially now when we realize that the edge is now the home router, as we talked about, and you have to worry about gaming systems and all of that.
Yeah.
First, let's talk about where you actually can control it in an office setting.
Right.
And the main thing. So when you're doing that, step one, let's define what we need to protect.
Mm-hmm.
Because if there's nothing in here, I don't care.
Yeah. Well, here's the thing is that a lot of people assume that they don't have things that are valuable.
Exactly.
And that's where the hard part is. Oftentimes you look at data and you're like, well, this doesn't mean anything to anybody. So even if they get it, it's not valuable. What you often don't know or understand is that everything has a value to it. And sometimes you are not the target, you are the conduit.
Yes.
So just remember that even though your information may seem to be not valuable or common knowledge type stuff, it's easy for somebody to then use that to pivot to somebody else, or even, just act like they are you if they get some of your information.
Yeah. And imagine this is somebody that's a criminal. And if they walked in the door looking like them, everybody be like, criminal. So then they become you and everybody's like, oh, normal person. And then suddenly you are considered the criminal. So there's a lot to worry about.
Mm-hmm.
So just protecting who you are is important, but all of the information that you have and you have access to, and even, as David mentioned, the conduit to others, think about the access to others that you have within, maybe 2 degrees of separation. It could still, that connection could matter. So if you think, okay, this is available to everyone and everyone can see it, well, granted, there's a lot of people that are out there blasting everything they do on social media, but they still think that they have things that they want to keep personal. They just don't know how much they're giving away.
Mm-hmm.
So there's that. What if everybody sees it? What if I can never trust that this information is correct? Somebody has screwed it up, the integrity part, and that was one of the things where we went down that rabbit hole with Dave and Ben about how horrifying that could be.
Mm-hmm.
And then what if you could never, ever get to it again? And you know what most people freak out about? I've lost my phone numbers. They don't care about that. I've lost my pictures.
Yeah.
That's the big thing. I've lost my pictures. But still, there is more to it than I will never see the pictures again. Think of how if pictures matter to you, then you need to realize there's way more information there that you have that matters that much. You just don't know it.
Mm-hmm.
And then if it's the business, well, we know we've got accounting, we've got the core business, which is PHI in our world, the healthcare information, PHI, EHI, PII. But that is the important information along with proprietary stuff. What's your secret sauce?
Mm-hmm.
I don't want to always give away all of our secret sauce. You got to hire me to get my secret sauce. I'll give you a recipe, but I'm going to leave something out or something.
I am the saucy.
And then once you identify what those are, then you need to have a full inventory of where that information that you need to protect, where it lives and breathes.
Mm-hmm.
So your equipment, the software that supports it, those are also valuable assets. Those are your house.
Yeah. And it's amazing that this process sounds awful familiar.
Yeah, maybe like a risk analysis.
Sounds like the steps to start in that direction.
Yeah, I do. Because the next thing you need to know is what would the impact be if those systems and data were attacked, where you could expose it to everyone, or you can't trust it anymore, or you lose it.
Mm-hmm.
That would be your risk analysis.
Mm-hmm.
And I do risk analysis. We've talked about it all the time. We do them. We just don't realize it. And it's time for us to do that in order to assess our home. And we look around and say, is that floor going to fall through? Maybe I should fix that. Because I don't need the top floor becoming the bottom floor all at the same time.
Yeah. Donna, stand here. I'm going to go upstairs and jump on this floor. Tell me if it bends. Yeah. So if you're following us so far, you're already going down that rabbit hole of doing a risk analysis. So it'd be fairly easy to continue down this. We will stop there and go into the cyber hygiene piece. But just for your information, no, you're well on your way to a risk analysis at this point.
Right. But that is what you have to do to know what you need to protect.
Exactly.
So now that you know what you need to protect and you've thought it through, now let's talk about hygiene.
Okay.
So
you have to brush up and down, round and round.
Yeah.
2 minutes.
Who teaches you how to brush your teeth? Who teaches you that your teeth are valuable? Apparently, it was not something that everybody knew all years ago.
It was the letter people.
The letter people. Okay.
Yeah. Mr. T.
Yeah.
He had the teeth.
Yeah. So now that I know I got to brush my teeth, that's my assessment. I'm going to brush my teeth, comb my hair, wash my face and my hands, shower, wear some deodorant. I'm going to make sure that the roof stays up, and my car is safe to drive, and all those things.
So what do you do about the places on your body that you can't reach, like your back and stuff? How are you going to keep proper cyber hygiene for places you can't get to?
Well, there's 2 ways. One is I ask for help.
Okay.
With someone who can, or I use the bear method and back up to a tree and scratch my back. And and to me, that's the way to go. If you got nothing else, you do the best you can with what you've got to work with. But I don't ignore the itch.
So we call that a compensating control.
Exactly.
All right, let's dive into what some of these protections are. So we've identified what needs to be protected. Now, what are some things we can do to protect the things we've identified?
All right. Well, we've talked about a lot of these over and over and again, but this is what the hygiene is. The advanced antivirus, patching the operating system and the applications, actually monitoring what's going on with them, looking at your logs so that consider that looking in the mirror.
There you go. That's a good way to put it.
There you go. If I'm not looking at the logs, that means you never look in the mirror. That means everybody else can see what's going on in your network, not you.
That's right. Yeah. And you need one of those friends that'll tell you, hey, you got something between your teeth. Right now.
Yeah. You need that because that's your unused devices. Are you using that? Because you need to get it out of your teeth.
Hold on. Just for you, Donna.
But if we get everybody to think about it this way, maybe we can make progress. That if you're not using the software anymore and you're not, and I'm not saying I'm great at keeping all the software, but I'm constantly looking at stuff and I load stuff to play with like you do to test it out and to see if they interfere with each other. So, and I've got tons of apps I play with on all of my devices.
Yep. So here's what I do. Might help somebody. So you know how they tell you that every time you have a time change, to change the batteries in your smoke alarm and all this kind of stuff, smoke detector. So, which, the other rabbit hole of that is if they get rid of the time change, what are we going to do? But anyway, so what I use that as an opportunity to do the spring cleaning on my computers as well. So I'll go in, pull up the list of programs I have, and then start cleaning those up. So at least twice a year, I know I'm cleaning out all these old programs that I've installed and I'm not using anymore. And when it kind of going back to the patching piece, we as IT folks often tell people, especially MSPs, we come in and we sell them on patching. And sometimes we say things like, we patch third-party applications. But you need to understand what that means, because 99.9% of the time, they're not patching all of your applications.
Right.
And so there's a big disconnect between we patch your computer or we patch third-party applications, but they're not patching everything. And so you need to know what that looks like so that you can make some provisions, some compensating control to patch those things that aren't being patched by your IT provider.
like when you need to scratch your back.
Yes, absolutely. So
Yeah.
think about those things. And, you mentioned software, devices. I mean, even this week, I talked with a client and I'm like, you've got this Windows 7 machine showing up. What's the deal? Because I thought we were past this conversation. And we don't use it? You said don't use it. We don't. All right. I know, but it's still plugged into the network.
And turned on and running.
Yeah, I'm still getting feedback from this device. Why is it still out there? Oh, you want us to shut it down? I thought you just said don't use it. I'm like, are you serious? Throw it away. But anyway, it was a funny conversation, sort of.
Oh, well, yeah, in some ways, right?
Yes. So
when we say get rid of it or don't use that, we literally want you to get rid of it, not just leave it sitting there.
Funny stuff. But so we have that. And then, another thing we talk about all the time is password management.
Yes.
This is one of those things where it's a challenge. I don't know when the challenge or if the challenge will ever go away, but password management is a big issue. It's a big problem to solve because you have the management of the password, but you also have the fact that people will say, yes, I use a password manager. But then when you look at the passwords they're using, you're still knocking yourself in the head going, what are you doing? You can't use a password manager and still use password 123.
Yeah. The whole point of it is you have one complex one you remember that opens the door to all the ones you don't even know because the computer made them up.
Yeah. It's kind of like, think about it this way where nowadays you don't really know anybody's phone number anymore.
Exactly.
You had to remember everybody's phone number.
Oh my gosh.
Now we don't have to because we have these cell phones that keep all that information. So they basically become a phone book manager. Right?
Yeah.
So you don't know all the phone numbers anymore, but you know how to get into your device, which has all the phone numbers. Same concept.
Yeah. So for those of you too young to remember, at one time you carried them here, or you had a little black book. And then it was real exciting when these, what were they? The Palm Pilots came out and things like that where, I got a device that I can sync to my computer and store my phone numbers, but I'm going to carry that in my pocket. So when I go to a phone.
Yeah. Remember the first like push button phones that finally had it where you could save like 3 important numbers?
Oh, yeah.
Oh,
yeah. It's like I don't have to dial that anymore.
Yeah. So, even the redial, because, you and I come from the rotary phone era. But the whole redial thing was like, oh my gosh, a redial's a thing.
Well, the fact that we still call it dial, the number.
That's true.
Okay, so, yes, that's what a password manager is.
Mm-hmm.
Right?
All right, so, so the next one here, I did not call it data backup. I call it data restoration ability.
Exactly. Yes.
You need to test your data restoration ability because, HIPAA says something to the effect of you should be able to restore exact copies of information. So
fair enough.
Yeah. So you should have some way that you can ensure that you have the ability to restore your data. I'm not calling it a backup. I don't care what you call it.
Yeah. We've got to ditch the backup thing. Yeah.
Yeah. Because so many times I have the conversation. People are like, yeah, we got to back up. Yeah, we got to back up. Does it work? I don't know. You never tried it. Well, then isn't it important that you can restore the data? Well, yes. Well, then you're not testing the most important piece of it.
Yes, I know. Back in the early days, I had to recover it's a long story, but the net of it is, back then, everything was still stored in ways that it wasn't just scattered all over the disk, and it was in chunks. And I went in and spent an entire weekend reading the thing and restoring and rebuilding an index to all the data files on the disk.
That sounds painful.
It was a super nerdy weekend and an exhausting one. So the point of being able to restore, we need to come up with, it's not a backup and restore. It's just, can you restore?
Yeah, because if you can restore, you have a backup.
Exactly. I don't need to ask if you have a backup. Can you restore?
Yep, exactly.
All
Those are the questions to ask. And there are other questions around that. And we've had these discussions about understanding what restoring means. Like, how far back can I restore? Or how many copies back can I restore? Or how long is it going to take to restore even? Good questions to ask.
Yeah, it's kind of like the insurance that you get, health insurance and insurance for your car and your house. That's caring for those things so that if something goes wrong, I can properly take care of it.
Yeah. And I always love the people that say, I need to be able to restore within minutes. And then you say, okay, great. It'll cost X. You know what? Being down a couple of days is probably okay. So you have to understand that you can have just an immaculate level of restore functionality, but it may not fit your budget.
Yes.
But on the other side of that, you have to have a budget that can not only fit that restore, but vice versa. So if you really need it to be restored that quickly, you better find a way to afford it, because when you are down, it's going to cost you massively to not have the ability to restore like that.
Yep. So with that in mind, we suggest in here the concept of implement a framework like HIPAA, or what we often mention, the standards, NIST, and all those others. But the reason that we say that, it's the same thing as, well, I don't know, during COVID or before COVID, it probably started. Everybody was using the Marie Kondo, Kondo system. I mean, I know, but I haven't watched it, but my friends are like, oh, this is how you fold things and all, but it's systems that create standards that you follow that makes things more effective, efficient, neat, and organized.
Yep.
That's what frameworks are. And that way you are accounting for all the things. And if you can't account for them, you either get rid of them or you find a way to make them functional and properly cared for. That's what the frameworks are for.
The great thing about frameworks too is that it eliminates the need for you to say, what should I be thinking about? Or what have I missed here? Because you've got other people that are, parts of huge groups that are coming together, and they're figuring those things out for you. And then they're putting them into a document so that you don't have to go through and spend massive amount of time. Massives. Is that a word? You don't have to spend a massive amount of time trying to figure it out on your own. You've got a framework to follow.
Yeah. So, and these things are those systems, and now you still have to figure out, am I missing any of my own stuff? But once I know it, these frameworks help you figure out all the things to do to protect them. And that's an important thing. The limit admin access, that's kind of like, I don't know, limiting, that's your security control. Who are you going to let in the house? Right.
How many people are you going to give your house key to?
Yeah. There you go.
Yeah. You got the heat and air guy that needs to come over. Are you going to give him the house key? Or are you going to ask your brother to come over and let this person in, versus giving them the house key, for example?
And are you going to let them go everywhere in the house once you let them in, unabated? Or are you going to follow them and make sure they stay in a certain area of the house, that you only give them the access they need? Yeah. We're working on these analogies today.
Yeah, but it is amazing how a lot of this, it easily goes into quote unquote real world examples. You just have to think of it that way.
Yeah, and I think a lot of it is because you turn on the computer, and as much as everybody complains today, you turn on the computer, it works. And that's why you notice it when it doesn't.
Yeah. Since Don and I come from a time where it's like, you got to configure the COM ports and the IRQ to get it connected to the dial-up.
Yeah.
Like, what?
You got to open it up and move those little...
Yeah.
Yeah, the jumps. Why am I losing...
The jumpers?
Yeah. Where
dip switches and all
dip
that.
switches. There you go. I got to change the dip switches and it's talking to that kind of computer. Open it up and turn these little tiny switches.
There was a time when you could hear the internet before you connected to it.
Yeah.
It actually makes a sound.
Yeah. So, yeah, things have changed a lot, and understanding that when it just works, often you forget about it.
Mm-hmm.
If it doesn't require that kind of care and feeding, then you forget about it. Can't forget about it. It has to be cared for, which is why we have the next suggestion, which is documented, scheduled review process.
Yeah, because if you don't document it, it didn't happen.
Can't
and
prove
if you
it.
Don't, and if you don't schedule it, it won't get done.
Exactly. If it's not on the calendar.
Yeah. So I don't want to say just documented review process, because you were like, oh yeah, I have one of those. When's the last time you did it? 5 years ago? No, it has to be documented and scheduled.
And I would suggest that you make a list of what you're going to review.
Yeah.
So you don't have to remember.
And the reason this is the last one that we're going to talk about under protections is because I've been in environments, and I'm sure you have too, Donna, where you ask people these questions. Do you have advanced AV? Do you do patching? Do you do all this other stuff? And they say yes. But then when you go looking, it's not there. Mm-hmm. And you're like, no, this is not here. What do you mean it's not there? It was there 2 years ago. Well, you obviously have not scheduled a documented review process to happen here, because you thought you had it, or you had it at some point and it's no longer there or no longer working.
Yeah, no one's looking.
Yeah.
Hello.
And so you got to check these things out, because I can't tell you how many times I've run across antivirus programs or security programs that are no longer functioning because they didn't get updated or they're broken, backups that are no longer working, all these things that somebody had at some point that were working, but because nobody's going back and checking, they're not working anymore.
Oh, and somebody got an alert somewhere.
Oh, yeah.
But they didn't.
I'll get to it later.
Or I don't know what that means. Click.
Yeah.
It's down there in the corner. It's down there.
Or the one I love, but my IT guy told me not to click on anything. Okay, but when you start seeing something about your protection has expired, at least let us know.
Yeah, just tell somebody.
Yeah.
Don't click on it, but tell somebody to look.
Yeah. Yeah. Which fortunately we don't have that problem with clients because we manage everything. But back in the day, before we did that, it was, you had to have people look, tell me if you see something that, we need to know about. But there are still other things we don't often manage that people need to tell us about. You're getting an alert from your payment card provider or your bank or something like that. We need to know about it because it may have something to do with your network or a user.
Well, and keep in mind that there are still people that don't have IT companies managing everything like you do.
Mm-hmm.
All IT companies don't manage to the level that you do.
I know.
Nor
do all IT companies understand HIPAA very well.
Oh, please.
I don't want to go down to that story, but
somebody tried to tell David about HIPAA. Somebody tried to tell me about HIPAA this week too.
Let me just say, let's get it out there. Maybe we'll do an entire episode on it. But a business associate agreement does not give you unrestricted access to any and all PHI of the covered entity to which you have a business associate agreement. Okay.
Right. And signing a business associate agreement doesn't mean that is your relationship. If you just decide you want access, but there is no actual service involved, that does not allow it either. Just getting it out there.
Yeah. Anyway. We may use this as a learning opportunity in the future.
Moment.
There you go. We may do that, but yes.
So moving along, as we digress, after we talk about this review, so now these are the things, the protections that are in place in the environment. What about the individual's care? Individual.
This is fun.
Yeah.
This is fun.
So, we always talk about we have to provide training, that we need to do the training and you need to do the, each of us as individuals, it's everybody's responsibility to actually take the time and interest to learn these things, because it does impact all of us.
Mm-hmm.
So whether you're at home working, where it really does matter, even if you're not connecting to an office, at your home, it does matter that you worry about cybersecurity.
Mm-hmm.
We've had plenty of discussions where something at home causes one day I took something, the camera card, and I took it to the home computer, plugged it in, and took pictures that I'd taken at the office for something else. And then that card got infected because I used it on the home computer.
Mm-hmm.
It's little bitty mistakes like that cause the problem. But the bottom line is we're all too connected today to not get better educated.
Yeah.
And I highly recommend, and we'll have a link to it, the Stop, Think, Connect campaign.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's some good information for individuals and home networks for sure.
Yeah, you can go there to the toolkit, and it's like information based on the audience. And it's,
Mm-hmm.
children and teachers and parents and older Americans and young professionals. And I mean, it's all broken down, and you click on it and it says, okay, here's some things for you to learn. Oh, let's talk about online gaming and the things that we need to learn and some tips that we should keep in mind when we're doing these things. Mobile banking, let's learn about that. There are plenty of ways to get the information if you are willing. And that's what we're talking about.
Mm-hmm.
We need you to be willing to wash your face, clean your hair, maybe even, I know it's way out there, wear some clean clothes. But
yeah,
that's the kind of thing that we're talking about with cyber hygiene. It gets down to the individual, not the organization, but also the individual.
Yep. And if you need somebody to help you clean behind your ears, that's when you hire people like me.
But we can offer all the training in the world, and we can try different things like clearly what we're doing here.
Mm-hmm.
But if people do not choose to participate, I choose not to participate. One of my friends had a kid that I choose not to participate. Wait, what?
Or even worse, you find somebody that will tell you what you want to hear. It's like, all right, I've got these people telling me that I don't smell very well, but I'm going to keep asking because sooner or later somebody ain't going to want to hurt your feelings.
Exactly.
And they're not going to tell you. Oh, no, you're fine. See, I'm good. Mm-hmm. No, don't keep walking around looking for people to tell you what you want to hear.
It's like there's a great movie, and there's so many things in that movie, and I'm like wanting to laugh right now just thinking of watching it. Waking Ned Devine. And if you haven't seen that, and the guy that's the hog farmer trying to get rid of the smell of the hogs throughout the entire movie, it's all these different soaps, but he cares about it because the woman he's in love with says, no, you smell like hogs. If you haven't seen the movie, great movie, just to catch the motorcycle scene with the naked guy. So it's great. It's a great movie, and don't miss the ending either. It's great. But it's the same concepts of don't go around waiting until you get the answer that you want. If the room full of people and 80% of them tell you there's a problem and 20% don't, but guess what? The 20% haven't smelled you. The 80% have.
Or maybe they had COVID and they can't smell nothing right now.
Right. I know. So there's a lot of reasons. I mean, it's pollen season. People are stocked up.
Yeah. It's all kind of stuff.
But don't just say, well, so-and-so told me I don't have to worry about it. You do. We all do. And, it's too complicated for me to have a password on my phone. It's not. Yeah. You need it. And, And you need to get educated on all the scams that are out there.
Mm-hmm.
Because that like I talked about with Dave Bittner's, one of the podcasts he's on is Hacking Humans. If you listen to Hacking Humans, just pick a handful of episodes, 2 or 3, and you don't realize there is a lot going on out there that you don't know about, that it never occurred to you. That should be evidence enough that you need to pay attention.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
So educate yourself and then pick and choose the things that we talked about that apply to your home network.
Yep. So I got a good story that's unfolding for me this week.
Oh,
so we have a new client that's an insurance agency, and they're getting all their cybersecurity stuff in order and all that. And they sent me an email yesterday, and it is a letter from a software vendor that they sell the software into insurance agencies. And the letter says, "We take your security seriously."
Oh,
you know where this is going, right?
Oh, yeah.
We had a breach.
There's a problem.
We had a breach, and that breach has touched you. Some of your folks have caught up into this breach, and and so the guy, I haven't spoken with him yet. We have a meeting next week, but he's like, "I'm doing all this stuff to bolster my security and to do things right, and this dumb third-party vendor has a breach, and now I've got to deal with that." I'm like, yes, you do.
Supply chain.
Yeah. I said, but remember this, when you start telling your clients about this, they're going to question what you are doing to protect them. So at least you can say, now I'm doing all these things and it still happened, but it wasn't because we didn't try and we're not taking our obligations seriously. It's still going to suck for you, but it's a whole lot better than position you were in a few months ago.
Yeah, we're not ignoring it at all, but that doesn't mean that nothing's going to happen. Right? Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
You can take really good care of yourself and still have health problems.
Yeah, absolutely. So, again, that's something you have to think about. You could be doing everything tip top, dotting your I's, crossing your T's, and you could still have an incident where it's going to affect you in a negative way. But you have to consider how it's going to look if you're doing nothing or little versus you're doing all these things right and it still happened.
Mm-hmm.
Because if you're telling me you're not doing much of anything, if I'm not fully educated on what's going on, my thought is the third-party vendor breach is probably due to something you didn't do. I'm going to probably connect those things together.
Yeah.
And so you've got some brand damage you've got to deal with.
Well, and the other thing is, in the world we live in today, we have to start asking more questions about the vendors we're using and
mm-hmm.
how they're protecting our business and our data. And what was the 500 million? They scraped information from publicly available information, scraped it
mm-hmm.
from LinkedIn, and have created these databases that are now for sale with 500 million people in them.
Is that LinkedIn or Facebook?
Maybe Facebook.
Yeah, the recent one.
Yeah, so I just saw it.
Yeah.
But for some reason, I was thinking LinkedIn, but maybe Facebook.
Yeah, I think it was Facebook. But yeah, so they can get all that information. So you've got to do your part. If everybody's doing their part, we'll have less issues to worry about.
Do your part. Be cyber smart.
On that note, that is our show for today, folks. Here's Donna. She's taking over my role.
Well, at least you didn't do the womp, 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 womp.
Yeah, no kidding. So remember to follow us and share us out on your favorite social media site, and even if it's been breached, and rate us on our podcasting app. Thanks again for listening, and we'll catch you next week. Have an amazing time with the rest of your week. So remember, for Donna and myself, HIPAA is not about compliance. It is about patient care.
You've been listening to the Help Me with HIPAA podcast, hosted by Donna Grindle and David Sims. The show created to help you with HIPAA. For more information or to ask us a question, visit our website at helpmewithhipaa.com. Neither Donna Grindle or David Sims are attorneys, and they do not offer binding legal advice concerning regulatory compliance. The information in this podcast should not be relied upon or construed as legal advice in any way. Consult your attorney for legal advice concerning compliance with HIPAA regulations.